How do you feel about the performances of all the actors portraying these historical characters, since you were around to see them in real life back in the day? You knew how they really were.
The movie could be about that. Here is a very paranoid guy who wants to climb the ladder of power, not the ladder of success.
You made artificial intelligence, you just gotta push a button and it's active. Are you doing it or are you not doing it?
I'm not doing it. Do you press the AI button, Shane?
I'll press it. Especially if we're in the circumstances of the Oppenheimer movie. If we don't do it, someone else is gonna do it, they're gonna use it against us. Christopher Nolan made some comments regarding AI and how they're kind of at the same crossroads. Is AI gonna become this terrible weapon, or is it gonna become this beautiful thing that helps us build a utopia? What do you think about that?
It's gonna be a terrible weapon.
Hi, welcome to The Real Generation Gap. My name is Shane.
And I'm Fred Sottile.
And today we are talking about Oppenheimer, the newest movie from Christopher Nolan. So we just saw Oppenheimer. Tell me just your initial thoughts. You know, the last movie we saw was Sound of Freedom. Compare your movie-going experience between the two movies and your overall thoughts on the movie.
Two vastly different movies. One is The Sound of Freedom. Obviously, it's a tragedy. And you come out of the theater having been told that there's a huge problem that has to be addressed.
It's kind of the same for this movie.
Yes, yep. Nuclear annihilation would be real bad, and it should be addressed. But this movie, you know, it's a good question because both of them are biographies. One of them is a real guy that went in the jungle and rescued kids. The other is the guy who made the bomb. So I didn't even realize that they were similar in that way. I enjoyed Oppenheimer much, much more. I really liked Oppenheimer. I liked the other one as well. I think I liked the other one more than you.
Yeah, for me, I was not a big fan of Sound of Freedom. I thought it had a lot of corny aspects, mentally prepared to go in such a heavy movie. I think knowing that it's something ongoing, makes it a lot heavier. It's almost like you're watching it's not a documentary, but it kind of feels like it because you know what I'm saying? So I wasn't too excited about it, and I thought it was a little corny. And but Oppenheimer, like, that was fun. It was.
There were triumphant moments.
Yes. There
were. And also, we're not continuing to drop these bombs.
Yes, exactly. It was a much more pleasant experience for me, and it just felt way more cinematic. Felt very cinematic. Versus, and I don't know if that has a lot to do with production budgeting, even though Sound of Freedom was owned by Fox originally, so there is a big studio behind it originally, but yeah, I just enjoyed Oppenheimer substantially more. Cool. Yeah, like you said, though, it was a 3-hour movie, and if anyone who knows me knows I gotta pee like every 15 minutes, so it was a little difficult to get through. I definitely sprinted to the restroom a few times, but the whole 3 hours I was in it, and like, it's kind of fast at some points, and I was like, oh man, I can't keep up, what's going on? But the end does a really good job of tying it all together, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. Now I get what's going on here and here and here. I was entertained the whole 3 hours. Typically, 3-hour movie, I kind of like mentally take a break for a while, but I loved it.
Yeah, there was really nothing to cut.
Yeah.
Not really. And I even could have included more.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Definitely. We
had very different impressions of the movie when we came out, and I was happy that was the case. Since the movie was called Oppenheimer, the first thing I really want to talk about is the man, Oppenheimer.
Sure.
Obviously, he was a very, very unusual guy. He was probably somewhere on the autism spectrum. He had special gifts. People say special needs, but I prefer to think of him as special gifts sometime. And despite the fact that this was a huge billion-dollar operation, they really couldn't have done it without him. Now, they couldn't have done it without him, but they couldn't have done it without the people who support him. And I was fascinated with all those people. There's a good picture of some of them, but there were others that, in my case, I was very impressed with Oppenheimer's wife. this is something that Shane and I, this is one of our big differences. She wasn't a significant character to him necessarily, but she was a person who could see what was going on from a very different vantage point. He was being taken advantage of by a manipulative man in the cabinet who had a personal vendetta against him, and he was handling that, but she hated that, and she expressed it in the story, and it was interesting to me because it was part of the story.
Yeah, I thought Oppenheimer, I didn't really know too much about him prior to seeing this movie. I knew of him. I knew he developed the first nuclear bomb. But from seeing the movie, I've become a little more interested. And I think he's kind of got a little swagger to him for a scientist. I know that was very normal back in the day to wear suits and everything. But I feel like he's kind of got a swagger. And if he was walking around today, I think he'd be pretty trendy. Especially with the hat, and I like how Nolan saw the hat as kind of like a piece to his character.
So I talked about Oppenheimer and his unique mind, and I talked about his wife and her unique position in viewing everything that was going on in the Manhattan Project. I mean, they went out in the desert and built an entire town, and this woman was brought there, and she could clearly see how the military was treating him, how he was treating the military. She wasn't happy with the way everything was going. It was kind of mutually abusive. And for a person with his genius and perhaps with his autism, the way he handled it was interestingly portrayed in the movie. Now, another character that was in the movie was a military man, a colonel named Leslie Graves, who was portrayed by Matt Damon. And he was an interesting character because he was the voice of reason. The military wanted results. They wanted results on time. They wanted, what are you doing? How's the schedule? That schedule wasn't possible. Oppenheimer was a genius. He had to do things at his own speed. And according to this gigantic staff of people that was supporting him while opposing him, there were ethical issues that were coming up. Everybody had all this going on, but the project had to move forward. Leslie Graves was the interface between the demanding military and the genius of Robert Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer had to be catered to. He was the only one capable of pulling the project off.
How do you feel about the performances of all the actors portraying these historical characters? Since you were around to see them in real life back in the day, you knew how they really were. How do you think these actors like Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon?
Okay, first of all, this happened years before I was born.
I couldn't tell that. I couldn't tell.
Oh, okay. Is it the haircut?
It's a lot of things.
Okay, it's a lot of things. Fair enough.
It's the laptop you have in front of you.
Right, yes. Interestingly enough, there's more information on these pages than there are on your screen right now. But anyway, truly, I've been interested in World War II my whole life. I was born 10 years after World War II, and when I was young, every town had an airplane or a tank or a cannon in the middle of the town. And everybody remembered the war well. The fathers were all involved somehow. The mothers were all involved. There were family members that were lost in the war. We had people in our community walking around with shell shock. Now they call it PTSD. So anyway, being that you're far more interested in the actor who played the part, and you're asking me, how did I feel about his performance? Well, you probably have a better opinion or a more educated opinion on that. What else have you seen him in?
I saw him in Peaky Blinders. I haven't finished the whole series, but he's really great in Peaky Blinders. And I think he's an interesting guy. He was saying, I saw him in an interview, and he said how because in Peaky Blinders, he's always smoking. And he's pretty much said that he's tired of smoking in all his projects and he doesn't want to do that anymore. And I thought that was pretty interesting, especially with how much he smokes in this movie. But I thought Robert Downey Jr. was great too as Louis Strauss. What do you think about the character before we get into the acting?
The movie could be about that. Here is a very paranoid guy who wants to climb the ladder of power, not the ladder of success. He wants to climb the ladder of power. And early on in his career, in the movie, they portray his paranoia right away. When Einstein first appears, Strauss and Oppenheimer are together, and Einstein is standing by the lake, and he tells Strauss, oh, I know him, I'll talk to him. And he goes down, he talks to Einstein for a few moments, and when Einstein leaves, he snubs Strauss. He just walks by without even looking at him. And so Strauss gets the impression that the two of them talked about him. He has an axe to grind, he has a grudge to bear. And his whole life is based on this.
Yeah.
He's that kind of a political weasel. And you see this in real life now. There are these guys who just don't give up.
Yeah. My biggest experience with Robert Downey Jr. is definitely Iron Man.
He is Iron Man.
He's Iron Man. Right. So it was interesting to see him, in this role, which was a much different character. So that was
sociopathic people always are. He was a sociopath.
Yeah, you would know, right?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I'm older than you. I've known a lot of sociopaths. I could give you a typewritten list if you later on. Yeah.
Yes, you could. So this movie touched on communism quite a bit, whether it be them talking about Oppenheimer being a communist, or the early days of the Communist Party and how he was kind of associated with it, but he said he wasn't, or the girlfriends that he had being communists. There was a lot of that fear. And, I remember a lot of history about the Red Scare, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I feel like, USA is always pushing anti-communism, being fearful of communism. What did you think? How do you think that played in the movie, and in relation to what really went down in real life?
That's a very broad question. But I appreciate it. But in the movie, the thing that I found the most interesting in the movie is something that relates to politics today, and that is communism was weaponized. Louis Strauss had the vendetta. He wanted to climb the ladder of power, and because Oppenheimer, a completely open-minded guy, communism was a new thing. A lot of people in America were looking at it, and he looked at it, and he had friends that were looking at it. The fact that he was Jewish was a lot of Jews were looking at this, and in the Jewish community, this was something that was being looked at by lots of people in America. They didn't know what to make of it. It's kind of a new thing, and it was considered a bad thing. It was a subversive thing. So what happened is the same as today. If you go to one website today and you look at a bad subject, a lascivious subject, that gets retained. And if anybody ever wanted to come after you, they would say, oh, well, look, he looked at this website. It could have been years ago. It could have been one time. You see this all the time in these judicial reviews. People want to be a judge. They wrote something in college, and now they're being taken to task for it. So Louis Strauss, in his hate and contempt for Oppenheimer, he amplified the fact that he had friends who were communist, that he had looked and studied communism, that he had donated. He donated a lot of money to the Spanish Revolution. And there was a big, at the time in Europe, fascism and communism were all being looked at by everybody. And so he decided to persecute him based on that. It was just mean. It was just a mean, dirty thing to do. And they brought this out in the movie. And Oppenheimer, who was more knowledgeable about atomic energy virtually than anybody. There were other people in the group, obviously, that were his equal, but he was the poster boy for it. But what Strauss did in a vindictive measure, he created a kangaroo court, this is portrayed in the movie, and he took away Oppenheimer's security clearance just to be, am I allowed to say a bitch on camera? Is that appropriate in this day and age? But that's what he did. It was basically, it was a bitch move done at the very highest level of government. And we see this today. We see this very same thing on the news every night. And a perfect example of somebody like that, of course, would be Adam Schiff. Okay. Here was a guy who, he hated Donald Trump. He wanted to go after him. He made statements as if they were facts when he had no evidence. And he created all of this hate all throughout the country. And Oppenheimer was questioned by the whole country at that time. People, because I was alive then, and people, wow, this guy made the bomb. But you know what? As it turns out, he's a communist. The government they're saying this. He had his security clearance taken away, right? Just like, yeah, Trump's got the documents in Mar-a-Lago. Well, that's as legitimate as this. The guy was not a communist. What he was a genius. He had a vision of atomic energy that was virtually impossible for even 1% of the population to understand. And here, a vindictive guy, a weasel, a guy who he wanted to be somebody more than he was, constantly struggling for power. And this is the weapon that he used. And this weapon, as you well know, because you're a film school guy and all that, you know what they did to communists. They had the blacklist in Hollywood, right? Their careers were ended or destroyed. It's just like now with the cancel culture. Yep. Oh, you said the wrong thing. Oh, you went to a meeting where your girlfriend went to a meeting that was the Communist Party. Well, now it's, your girlfriend went to a BLM thing or something like that. And now you're drawn into it. And now the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, they're on you and they're questioning you, and they'll question your veracity and your loyalty and all that. And look, in the movie, everybody said Oppenheimer was the most loyal American ever. But this guy just wouldn't let it go. And it's terrible when we, as a society, have to put up with that.
What do you know about Christopher Nolan? Have you seen his movies before?
No, this is your job.
So you've seen Memento, right?
I saw Memento. That was a fantastic movie.
Have you seen Interstellar?
Yes, another incredible. But I don't care that he was a director. Okay. I really don't. It's not.
So you think anyone could have just directed this movie?
But I don't care who did. I'm only looking at. In other words, when you look at a Rembrandt painting, you look at the painting. You don't say, well, Rembrandt. Now you know the whole biography and history.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Movies are very magical for me.
But there's still a unique style to each artist, correct?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge Hitchcock fan. I'm Kubrick.
Yeah. So what I observe from Christopher Nolan is he does a lot of playing and tricks with time. In this movie, typically when you watch a movie and something's in black and white, your mind naturally starts to think, okay, this is a flashback. Would you agree?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Flashback's the past. Black and white's old. In this movie, it plays with you because you find out that the black and white is the present and everything else is the past. And I think that just went with Christopher Nolan's. I feel like he has some kind of fixation with time and timelines and playing with your perception of time. Because I know you've seen Memento and Interstellar. They both do the same thing. And I thought that was really interesting. I never thought of seeing a movie where what's happening in present is black and white and everything else is in color. And I thought that was real fun. It was a small detail, but it makes a fun difference.
It was a fantastic technique that I didn't even realize was happening.
Yeah. I really liked the soundtrack. I liked how he used a lot of synths with like traditional orchestra music. And it really gave like that dark sci-fi, like impending doom feeling. And it just I feel like it really drove the movie. And even the way they used the soundtrack in certain scenes, it just really pushed that eerie feeling for me. And you're a music guy, so what did you think about the soundtrack?
It's true in every movie. Yeah. If you take the soundtrack away from every movie, they're unwatchable. Mm-hmm. Exactly. You have to. It's amazing how much drama they create, and how much it's not known. Now, this is interesting that you asked the question back to me, because about 6 months ago, I went to see Shen Yun. It's a stage production, and it's a fantastic dance thing with beautiful colors and incredible lights. And they also use like a 3D effect. They show a movie. Okay. So people that are on the stage actually like disappear into heaven because there really were a movie. Okay. And this is the kind of thing. Now, at the end of the show, everybody is blown away because the dancing is just great and the colors are great and the lighting's great. But what I liked more than anything was the music. And I went down, they have a live orchestra. So everybody's leaving. But I actually went down at the end and congratulated the orchestra on the fantastic job they did. So all of these, I mean, going all the way back to Elmer Bernstein with the Magnificent Seven, If the Magnificent Seven's on TV, I can literally just not even look at the TV and just do other things in the room.
So for people who don't know, what is the Magnificent Seven?
Well, it's a movie from about 1,000 years ago. Yul Brynner, and yeah, it's a cowboy movie.
Okay.
And these 7 gunslingers defend an old western town.
But the soundtrack really drives it.
The theme song of the movie is instantly known. If you
Give us a little demonstration.
No, I'm not going to sing the soundtrack, much as I would love to, much as I would. But yeah, the soundtrack is so great. And in that movie, the thing that impressed me, and I'm going to say it even though really it was you who mentioned it, was when the bomb was exploded, the first experimental bomb.
That was my favorite part. That was my favorite part of the movie.
Right, I'm stealing this from you.
You're stealing it. You're stealing it.
There's an incredible flash of light from the blast, and light travels faster than sound. So there's an incredible flash of light, and the theater is silent.
Silent.
And then like 7 seconds later, boom! Pow!
Yeah.
Right.
It was loud, like the theater shook. And when I saw it, at that point, there was a few old couples, and they literally got up and left. I think they couldn't take the loudness.
They were afraid of the fallout.
Yeah. Speaking of, the experience in the theater, how did you view this? Did you see it in standard? Did you see
Well,
IMAX?
it was IMAX, and that's the way. When there's an IMAX movie, go see it in IMAX, obviously. Obviously. The curved screen, I mean, you're really in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it in IMAX. I wanted to see it in 70 millimeter, but I couldn't find one nearby. My friend saw it in 70 millimeter, and he said the ticking of the reel was it added to the experience of, especially with the black and white. He said
So he actually heard a projector?
Yeah, he heard it.
So it wasn't a download?
Nope.
Because usually when you see a movie, it's just a download. It's like a giant YouTube thing.
So we were talking about Christopher Nolan. I had a few more things I wanted to ask you about. This movie had no CGI. Could you tell? Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Did you know that going into, or did you observe that?
No, I didn't observe it because I never could.
Okay.
That would get past me.
Yeah.
I would really think that they were in outer space or under the ocean.
Even okay, like when the movie opens and it's supposed to be showing like the neutrons and all the little things.
Well, those were obviously, yeah.
Oh, they weren't. There was no CGI in this film. It was something being done.
But Christopher Nolan is famous for that, right? His stunts are really real all the time, and I don't know how they did that in Interstellar.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there was no CGI. He recreated a nuclear explosion with all practical effects, and I thought that was really interesting considering
when the wind went,
the
wind,
and yeah, everything's CGI. Everything's, when you see the real shoot, it's all green screen. It's just the actors and it's a green room, versus they were really doing it. And I think that's real filmmaking, in my opinion.
I agree.
But CGI is cool too, though. But I have some quotes here I wanted to read and see what you think about it. This is Christopher Nolan. He said, "I think computer graphics, they're very versatile. They can do all kinds of things, but they tend to feel a bit safe. That's why they're difficult to use in horror movies. Animation tends to feel a little safe for audiences. The Trinity test, ultimately, but also these early imaginings of Oppenheimer, visualizing the quantum realm, they had to be threatening in some way. That they had to have a bite of real-world imagery. The Trinity test, for those who were there, was the most beautiful and terrifying thing simultaneously."
Yeah, of course they obviously have, and some of these movies are so spectacular you could hardly believe it. But this was not a movie that needed spectacular effects. It wasn't like a Star Trek movie. It was human beings in a room. It was human beings.
Yeah, I agree. But to just recreate...
It wasn't like Avatar.
No. But Robert Downey Jr. has a quote, and he said, "If Christopher Nolan had directed The Avengers, we'd still be shooting it." Which I found really funny, considering how much CGI is in those movies.
One of the things I struggled with in watching that was there are Americans who, when they saw how jubilant the team was when the bombs exploded, because they didn't know these bombs were going to explode for sure, but the Americans, it was like when you land on the moon, like, yes!
Yeah.
Now really, they were really saying yes that the project worked. They had nothing personal with these people or even the war themselves. They were physicists.
We're talking about, the scientists, yeah.
Okay, but in the audience today, we've had time to read reviews now, and I've seen reviews where people said, "Oh, America comes off ugly because they're cheering at this, at the development and the use of this bomb." What do you think about that?
I think it's a little silly. Of course, like you said, these scientists, they were happy that all their hard work, their science, it was correct. They got to where they were trying to get. And obviously, Oppenheimer himself was like, look, we created a monster. Like, we were hoping this monster would end all wars, but it's essentially a monster. So I don't think that it's showing, yay, all these Japanese are dead. It's showing, hey, these scientists were really happy of what they accomplished. I think it's a little silly to think any other way. Maybe you might say it showed, regular civilians happy that it worked, but that was war times. It's different. It's not a racist thing. It's a us versus you thing, in my opinion.
War is war. People are killing each other. You mentioned in your response that Oppenheimer believed that he had hoped that would convince the world not to escalate an arms race. But in reality, the exact opposite happened. And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. Nuclear fallout was kind of one of my first reoccurring nightmares. I used to play this game called Red Alert when I was a little kid with my dad, and basically it's about like World War III, essentially. Everyone's at war with each other. In the game, it was a lot of Russians, and I would have this nightmare that Russia was nuking LA, and it would reoccur for several years growing up.
No kidding.
And I think that it's messed up. It sucks that he had hope that it would change the projection of how evil man can be. And no, we took it to the worst possible place. USA's got nukes in every corner of the world. Russia's probably got a bunch. China's probably got a bunch. It's a weird time to be alive knowing that. What do you think, as someone who grew up in a world of nuclear threat? I'm sure you had the drills when you were growing up.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. It's interesting because Oppenheimer, he thought that demonstration would create a boundary. Yeah. We don't go past this point. We don't, as a human race, we don't go, this is nuclear annihilation. We're going to kill everybody. Right? I want very much for you to watch Dr. Strangelove. Okay. It's a fantastic movie. It's in the same paranoid period, and we'll watch that. But he really, his morality was questioned in his life.
Yeah, I think that was even part of the movie. He was saying like, oh, why don't we just demonstrate it on an unpopulated island or something like that, right? Isn't that what he said? And then they're like, no, it won't have the same impact.
That's right.
Especially on the Japanese.
Yeah, it had to be horror. He had to horrify everybody. But in reality, we weren't trying to horrify everybody. World War II was the most technologically productive time in human history. Considering where they were in 1940 compared to where they were in 1945, they had little propeller planes with a guy throwing a hand grenade out of a propeller plane next to a nuclear weapon. Yeah. So it was remarkable. The medical stuff, the advancements in every aspect.
So we were kind of talking about how Oppenheimer developed this new weapon, essentially, and hoping it would, make us all scared of it and, slow it down. Maybe we'd be more peaceful. Christopher Nolan made some comments regarding AI and how they're kind of at the same crossroads. Is AI going to become this terrible weapon, or is it going to become this beautiful thing that helps us, build a utopia? What do you think about that?
It's going to be a terrible weapon. You think? Yeah. For sure. And the reason is simple. Right now, everybody seems to call this the information age, and AI is information control. And so most of the population is, I will ask you this question a million times in our in our friendship together and everything. If you know what the word average means, that means that half is below average and half is above average. So half the people in our country, half the voters in our country, half the people doing everything in our country, half of them are below average. And these people are very easily manipulated. Yeah. And we live in a saturation of media, and AI is nothing but a media machine to saturate the media. So I almost knocked over the water. Greatest fear, right? It's a machine that will saturate everybody, regardless of where you are in the spectrum, with information, whether it's good information, bad information, whatever the purpose is for that. And being that there's an awful lot of strats in the world, these vindictive, scared, power-hungry people. Yeah. Usually those people are very relentless. Good people aren't.
But how do you think AI is going to be utilized to do what you're saying?
I think it's going to manipulate the mass of the population to think and do things that aren't in their best interest. I think that.
But don't you think that they're doing that now without AI?
Absolutely they are, but AI is going to make it exponentially more powerful. We were bombing Japan. Yeah. The atomic weapon was exponentially more powerful. They're saturating us with bad, weird, manipulated news, psyops of all kind. And now this is going to make it quicker and easier. And AI will be able to analyze who gets what message. Yeah. So if you are in favor of a politician for 10 reasons, but there's one thing that you disagree with, AI is going to find out what that one thing is, and every day they're going to tell you that. Mm-hmm. She doesn't like this, she doesn't like this, he doesn't like, he does that, he supports this, he supports this. So the 10 things that you might like, they'll never come to you. Mm-hmm. The bad thing will keep coming to you.
And do you think that outweighs the potential of having a cure for cancer, robotics that help handicap people?
Those things are going to happen too. Yeah. But I think that number one, it'll be weaponized, and weaponized first.
And you're not even speaking weaponized in killing, you're speaking weaponized in brainwashing.
Population control.
Yeah, population control.
Right.
And that's kind of scary.
It's
scary, but I think it's something that's already going on.
Here's what it is. In life, there are real people that do real things. Mm-hmm. Farmers grow food and you eat the food. Now, that's a real thing. Now, somewhere in the chain, before it gets to you, there's some kind of like warehouse guy or a broker who's making some money about that. But he doesn't make the food. Mm-hmm. You really don't need him. But he's sucking out of the system. And that's all these middlemen, all these politicians, all these agents, lawyers and accountants are good for this kind of a thing, right? They're not really productive people. So AI, I think, is going to help these non-productive people manipulate society so they can draw more out. When I was young, I learned about the mafia. And a friend of mine said, these are not people that produce anything, but they're strong enough and tough enough to take what you produce and control what you do and force you to do that. And so I think that wonderful, productive people, inventors, farmers, manufacturers, people who do real things, I think they're going to be manipulated by these scared, power-hungry, fearful people who they really can't make a contribution to society. So they're going to take what somebody else made and they're going to control it and do that.
So you pretty much think only the elites are going to have control of AI?
Yes, just like elites have control of nuclear weapons.
Theoretically, someone can make an AI to fight algorithms, to fight against that. Like, I don't want any of that junk in my computer. And you can have an AI processing that, So...
Yeah, there might be one.
So if let's say you were the Oppenheimer of AI, you have all the code in your head, you figured it out, you made artificial intelligence, you just got to push a button and it's active. Are you doing it or are you not doing it?
I'm not doing it.
You're not doing it.
Nope. And it's a shame because what you said is true. advances in medicine. They have robotic surgery now. A doctor doesn't even touch you. The thing is clean, like you can't even imagine. And we need that. One of the movies I like to watch with you that you're not aware of is called Fantastic Voyage. Okay. It's from the mid-'60s. Might be like, there's a song of that? I maybe.
Jazz
okay.
Band? Is that jazz band, right?
That
Disco?
Probably somebody named that. Okay, I wouldn't doubt that. But in the movie, they miniaturize a submarine like to the size of like a blood cell.
Okay.
And they put a team of doctors to go in there, and they go in a human body, and they're going to...
Have you ever heard of the Magic School Bus?
No.
Cartoon from like the 90s? It's the same thing, but cool. Continue.
Okay. So here is a technology story, you know, and I think that it's people now would love to see Fantastic Voyage. Okay. First of all, the special effects, this is in the mid-'60s. They didn't have CGI. Yeah. So the it's like Forbidden Planet. Have you ever seen Forbidden Planet? Forbidden Planet was the first movie to have the best special effects. Okay. It was groundbreaking at the time. It was astounding to the audience. You and I are going to watch these movies. Sure. And I'll be very interested to see your appraisal. And I'm not a fearful kind of guy, but I know it'll be weaponized quickly and early, and I don't want to see that.
Do you think we'll see a time where AI is fighting our wars and maybe people aren't even fighting in wars anymore? It becomes a battle of robotics and computers?
A battle of information? Because you're talking about a kinetic war, right? You're talking about actually blowing up buildings and killing people.
You don't think it'll even...
AI will be fantastically efficient at that.
Yeah.
And there's a movie coming out like next week. It's called Creator.
Okay.
And this is all what it's about. So there's people are thinking about this already, and they're preparing for it. And you know, science fiction always comes before science fact, and then moments later, all the Jules Verne stuff all happened, right? Do you press the AI button, Shane?
I'll press it. I'll press it, especially if we're in the circumstances of the Oppenheimer movie. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. They're going to use it against us. If that was the scenario, for sure I'm doing it because I'm American before I'm anything else. And but I'm also I'm
before you're a human.
That's a good point. But I think that other people who are bad in other places would use it against us.
What you're saying is that AI is inevitable. And
AI is inevitable.
Of course, you're right.
I think AI is inevitable. And I would push the button and I would hope for the best. And I do think that has lots of potential.
You know, hope is for people who don't have a plan, right?
Well, we're talking about things we don't even really understand.
Right. It's impossible to plan. First of all, we don't have the power to make the plan.
Essentially, we're kind of becoming God if we're truly creating like we're saying AI. Like I'm thinking AI. Like okay, I have AI on my Photoshop now. Like it's helping pictures. But I'm talking real AI, something that's thinking on its own, forming its own thoughts. That's scary. That's godly.
Godly is a weird place for us to go with this, but what is scary is when it can recreate itself.
Yes, absolutely.
I just watched the Day the Earth Stood Still, but the new one, not the real one.
Yes.
And they have the self-replicating robots, these tiny flies that just eat everything, and as soon as they eat something, they replicate. Yeah. So self-replicating, that's the thing that wipes out mankind. That's the
not being able to control it. Yeah.
And so when AI starts to have what would be quote unquote its own thoughts, when it comes to a conclusion, and of course this has been addressed in Space Odyssey 2001, right? The paranoid computer. The human beings are the random element that can destroy the mission.
Yes.
So the computer decides to get rid of them.
Get rid of the people. Yeah.
But getting rid of the people eliminates the people.
Yes, that's trying to protect.
So it gets into that thing. So where is AI going? I don't know. You don't know. We can only watch. And unfortunately, what you said is tragically true. We can only hope.
For the best.
I hate hoping. I like to know what I'm doing. So I guess we're done talking about the movie now.
Yeah, so...
Give it your rating. Give it your rating.
You want me to go first?
Yes, I do.
1 through 10. It was a great cast. It was a great director. There was no CGI, and it was all practical effects and very believable practical effects. It played with my head a little bit, kept me invested. I'm giving it a 9.2.
I didn't know we had digits.
Oh, we're doing it. I'm giving it a 9.2.
What was the one detracting thing that kept you from 10?
From 10? I guess I could have saw more Nazis die. That has nothing to do with the story of Oppenheimer.
Well,
No, honestly,
not at all.
honestly,
Not even at all.
I'm just trying to think what is a perfect. I don't have a 10. I've never seen a movie where like this is the best movie of my life, and that will be the 10. And I don't think I have it yet.
You didn't see The Godfather?
I've never seen The Godfather. I'm a self-proclaimed cinephile who's never seen The Godfather.
That's tragic.
It is tragic.
You need to see 1 and 2.
We should add that to the list.
That's so good. It's hard to even talk about that.
Okay.
Because you just, it's your
So Godfather's a 10 for you? 10 out of 10?
totally. And I really appreciate you giving it the high rating for all those good reasons. To me, it's just a 10 because I loved it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
See the magic. Yeah, I don't have a detracting thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't think all your points as you were going through them. Cast was great, story was great, the delivery was great, all the stuff, the editing and everything. I didn't even realize that the special effects were so organic and everything. Yeah. But I loved them all. I totally believed everything was happening.
Yeah.
The magic of it was totally there for me. And at the end,
you might not have the happiest feeling from what the movie's about, but like you feel complete because it was just, you saw the story. You got a good story and you were entertained. And, you know, when I go into movies, sometimes I'm like, you know, I'm watching a Transformers movie. This is not going to be a great story, but I know what I'm going into, and I'm going to enjoy this movie just for what it is.
Nonstop action.
Yeah, and I would still maybe give it like a 6, but I loved it. Like, was it a good movie? No. Like, you know, all these Marvel movies are getting like 90 on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. I'm like, this movie's the same movie as every Marvel movie. Right. It's not that great, but it's fun. I enjoy it. But what are we constituting as a 10 out of 10?
That's what we're going for. Now for me, when I came out of the Oppenheimer movie, I didn't know what time it was. Yeah. I did not know what day it was. I knew how to get home, but I didn't know what I was gonna do when I got home. So when I'm taking that far out, that's a 10. Yeah. That's a 10. Yeah, I suppose. Well, that's our review for the movie Oppenheimer. I really enjoyed the movie. I think if you check it out, you'll really enjoy it too. I'm Fred Sottile.
I'm Shane Schildmeyer. And as always, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, let us know what you guys think about this movie, and we'll catch you guys on the next review.